I always knew I was the disappointment. My name is Marina Blake. I'm 32 years old and I live in Washington, D.C. But when I'm back home in coastal Maine, none of that matters. Around here, I'm still just Vivienne's sister. Every time there's a family gathering, the same pattern plays out. My mom lays out a fancy spread: cheese board, wine, linen napkins, like she's hosting royalty. And then out comes the star, Vivienne, my older sister, my parents' golden child, the local girl turned celebrity chef. With her cookbook deals and Food Network cameos and her curated Instagram life. My mother introduces her like she's presenting a Nobel laureate. And me? I get a side hug and a pat on the shoulder. "Marina, you still in school or something?" my uncle asked last Thanksgiving. I just smiled. Something like that. I could have said, "Actually, I just got back from briefing the Director of National Intelligence." Or I was in Brussels last week handling back-channel negotiations to prevent a trade collapse. But what's the point? Let them think I'm some eternal student, floating between library jobs and temp work. It's easier that way. What no one knows, what I've spent years carefully hiding, is that I'm one of the youngest national security advisors in the country. My work is classified, my hours are brutal, and my impact? Massive. But there are no flashy titles, no TV interviews, no glossy social media feeds to parade. I fly under the radar by design. And still, the part that stings most isn't that they don't know. It's that they never cared enough to ask. Vivienne gets applauded for poaching an egg perfectly on live television. I once helped dismantle a multi-country cyber espionage ring. But all anyone wants to know is if I've considered trying something creative. I used to let it eat me alive. All the dinners where I sat there invisible. All the birthdays where my name was barely an afterthought in Vivienne's toast. But something shifted this past year. Not just inside me, but out there, in the world. Whispers are starting. There's a hearing coming up. A big one. National security, classified documents, oversight. And somehow, my name is on the witness list. They're going to find out soon enough. Not in a letter, not through some gentle announcement. No, they'll learn the truth in real time, on live TV, with the entire country watching. The quiet girl they never took seriously is about to take the stand. And I swear, I won't flinch. We grew up in a town called Eastport, right on the edge of Maine's rocky coast. Tourists came in the summers for the lighthouses and lobster rolls. We lived there year-round, tucked into a weathered blue house with peeling white trim and a wraparound porch my dad always meant to fix. Vivienne was 3 years older than me and already perfect by the time I showed up. She had curls that bounced when she ran, dimples that made old ladies pinch her cheeks, and a natural confidence that drew people in. By the time I could read, she was winning local bake-offs and grinning in the paper next to mayors and news anchors. Me? I liked puzzles, books with maps. I built paper models of embassies and traced the routes of global trade ships with a red pen on an old atlas I found at a garage sale. My mom called it a phase. My dad said it was quirky, but it never really changed. Vivienne got applause for her pies and applause again when she played Cinderella in the school musical. I won the regional science fair in 9th grade, designed a model system to detect corruption in aid distribution pipelines. And my mom's only response was, "You really went all out on that little hobby." They didn't mean to be cruel. That's the hardest part. It wasn't open hostility, it was a shrug, a chuckle. A quiet dismissal that told me, without them ever saying it directly, that nothing I did would ever matter as much as what Vivienne could whip up in a mixing bowl. I remember Vivienne's high school graduation like a scar. I stayed up for 2 nights painting decorations by hand because the school's budget had been slashed. I made this giant paper arch with hand-lettered banners that read "Class of the Future" and "Next Chapter Begins Here." I hung it all up before the sun rose the morning of the ceremony. When my mom saw it, she barely looked. "It's cute," she said. "Very craftsy." Then she turned to Vivienne, who was still in her robe, and gasped, "Oh, honey, you'll be the best-looking one there." That was the moment it sank in for me, that no matter how much effort I put in, how much I built, solved, or understood, it would never be enough to earn the kind of pride they reserve for Vivienne just by existing. The only person who ever truly saw me was Kira. She moved to Eastport in 8th grade, all elbows and sharp eyes, with a black hoodie that said "Nobody Important" in white letters across the chest. I thought she looked like a storm cloud, She told me later I looked like someone trying to disappear. She saw my science fair project and actually read it. Every word. "You know this is genius, right?" she said, squinting at one of the charts. "This is the kind of stuff people get recruited for." "Recruited for what?" I asked. She smiled. "Stuff that matters." That was the first time anyone ever said that to me, and I believed her. Kira was the one who told me to talk to Mr. Ashford. "He's the only teacher here who doesn't treat this town like it's the center of the universe," she said, sliding her feet up on the desk across from mine in the library. "You should show him your trade network report." So I did. Mr. Ashford was my history teacher, mid-50s, always wore the same 3 tweed jackets, and kept a tin of mints on his desk that no one ever touched. When I handed him my project on how embargoes affect developing economies, I expected a polite nod, maybe a few red pen corrections. Instead, he sat there for 10 minutes reading in silence. Then he looked up and said, "Marina, you ever consider international politics?" I blinked. "Is that even a real job?" He chuckled. "Oh yes, and I think you might be good at it." That one sentence stuck with me. I started digging. Government internships, scholarship programs, quiet forums for foreign policy nerds, where teenagers used screen names like Realpolitik 99 and debated trade with the kind of passion most people reserve for sports. Kira and I would sit in the back booth of the old diner and map out the next 10 years like it was a military operation. She had her eye on journalism. I wanted to work in intelligence. We swore we'd both leave Eastport for something bigger. When I applied to state schools, I didn't tell my parents. I filled out every form at the library, using their printer after hours when the night staff wasn't paying attention. I wrote essays between shifts at the bakery and saved every dollar from tutoring freshman math students. I got in, on scholarship, full ride. At the send-off dinner, my mom served Vivian's favorite lasagna. My dad told a story about Vivian's middle school talent show. When it was my turn to say something, my mom smiled and said, "We still can't believe you got into one of those government programs. Honestly, I didn't even know they let liberal arts kids into that sort of thing." I didn't correct her. Vivian didn't say much that night. She was already in New York by then, apprenticing under some hotshot chef, her name starting to pop up on blogs. She called during dessert, put on speakers so everyone could hear her say, "I'm so proud of you, Mar." But it came out rushed, hollow. After that, it was like I vanished. Every holiday phone call was about Vivian's rising star, her new boss, her big break, the buzz around her pop-up dinner series. My name didn't come up. My city didn't come up. I learned to live without it. Without their approval, their applause. I learned to build something of my own in silence, not for them, for me. Because deep down, even then, I knew one day I'd matter in a way none of them could ignore. I was 24 the first time I entered a secured briefing room. There's something surreal about walking through layers of steel doors, past guards who don't smile, and into a room where the entire world shifts without anyone outside knowing. That day, it was a cyber attack. Lines of code buried in the water treatment software of 3 major cities. Subtle, quiet, deadly if left unnoticed. I caught it. Technically, I was just an analyst back then, no clearance to lead. But I raised the red flag, connected the dots, built the report that landed on the secretary's desk. Within 48 hours, they'd launched a covert operation that neutralized the threat. No one knew it was me. I didn't need them to. The job didn't come with fame. It came with secrecy, pressure, and the kind of responsibility that aged you from the inside out. But it was mine, and I was good at it. I climbed fast. 3 promotions in 5 years. Cleared for briefings most people in the building didn't even know existed. I specialized in soft power, diplomacy, digital surveillance, misinformation campaigns. I never signed my name to a paper, never appeared in a photo. Back home, Vivian launched her 3rd restaurant. She called it V, just the letter, all sleek marble, moody lighting, and dry ice cocktails. It made headlines in Bon Appetit. "Isn't your sister amazing?" my mom gushed during one call. "She's on the cover of something again. I think it's about her sea salt butter, or maybe the farmer she found with the rare mushrooms." I smiled at the wall and said, "That's great." No one asked what I was working on. They never did. Once, during a video call, I logged in late after a briefing. I still had a blouse on from work, But Vivian raised her eyebrow and laughed. Look who finally emerged from her library. You still reading treaties or whatever you do? My dad chuckled in the background. I muted the call before I said something I'd regret. Let them believe I spent my days filing reports in some cubicle. Let them believe I never left the archives. It was easier, safer. My work couldn't be traced back to me. That was the point. But then things started to shift. It was subtle at first. Whispers in the trade circles I monitored. Inconsistent supplier chains tied to Vivian's restaurants. Quiet complaints from farmers claiming mispayments. Financial disclosures that didn't quite line up with her press releases. I flagged it out of instinct. I wasn't even sure why. It wasn't part of my purview, not officially. But something didn't sit right. Shell companies, overstated sourcing claims, inflated invoices that pointed to tax discrepancies. I didn't say anything, not yet. But I watched. The sister who'd built her empire on perfectly plated elegance was hiding something ugly underneath. I couldn't expose her, not then. It would have been personal. And in my world, personal meant compromised. But I tucked the details away, stored the files, marked them under a secure tag. And I waited. The email came late on a Thursday night. Subject line, need your advice, urgent. It was from Vivian. I stared at the screen for a minute before opening it. Inside was a polite paragraph, dripping with fake humility. She said she was negotiating a major expansion deal, new investors, a licensing agreement, the works. She'd really appreciate my insight. Said I'd always been the smart one with documents. That line alone almost made me delete it. But I didn't. Instead, I spent 3 weekends reviewing her contracts. Dozens of them. I flagged clauses that would leave her liable in a foreign tax jurisdiction, found a loophole that would have gutted her profit share, and rewrote her compliance strategy so it wouldn't violate 2 international sourcing laws. I sent her everything. Clean, detailed, professional. I didn't even ask for thanks. I should have known. A week later, I opened a news article, Vivian Blake, culinary mogul, business genius. It was one of those puff pieces. But halfway through, there it was. Vivian personally combed through every clause of her new deal, even outmaneuvering the lawyers with her deep understanding of international regulations. I sat back in my chair. The betrayal wasn't new. Not really. I'd lived in her shadow my whole life. But this felt different. I wasn't just forgotten. She'd stolen my work and called it hers. I confronted her, not in anger, just facts. I called her one night, calm and quiet. I saw the article, I said. There was a pause on the line. Oh, that, she let out a soft laugh. You know how journalists are. They just write whatever sounds good. You could have corrected it. I mean, it's not that big a deal, right? She said. You don't even work in business. It's not like this stuff affects you. I went quiet. Then she added, besides, I didn't think you'd mind. You always say you don't care about recognition. I hung up. A week later, our parents called to say how proud they were of Vivian's business acumen. My mom even posted the article on Facebook with the caption, Brains and Beauty, our Viv. No mention of me. Kira was the one who pulled me out of the spiral. She didn't just take credit, she said. She used you, and your parents let her. Again. I sat across from her in our usual cafe, fingers wrapped tight around a lukewarm cup of coffee. One day, Kira said, locking eyes with me, you're going to get your moment. And when it happens, it'll be bigger than anything they ever imagined. I nodded. Not because I believed it, but because I had to. It started as a whisper. I was in a classified briefing when I saw her name flash on a screen. Not as a footnote this time, but as a subject line. Vivian Blake, active investigation, federal level. My pulse didn't jump. I didn't even blink. I just stared at the words and waited. The report was concise. Supplier fraud, falsified purchase orders, tax evasion tied to offshore subsidiaries routed through shell sourcing collectives. They'd kept it sealed for months, but now it was moving. Fast. Someone in the room asked, Isn't she that TV chef? I didn't answer. I just excused myself and stepped into the hallway. Back home, the headlines hadn't caught up yet, but I knew it was coming. The walls were closing in. I waited a day before calling my parents. My mom answered, her voice tight with stress. Hey, I said. Oh, Marina, thank God. It's about Vivian. She's having a very difficult week. I waited. She's being targeted, she said quickly. There's been some confusion about her taxes and vendors. It's all political, obviously. Of course. And you've probably seen it already, my mom added. But just please don't pile on. She needs support right now, not lectures. Support. I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. Later that night, Kira called. They're prepping the hearing, she said. Vivian might be called in. I sat on the floor of my apartment, back against the wall. I know. Are you going? I didn't answer. You should, Kira said. Not as a sister, not even as revenge. You earned that seat. You deserve to be there. She was right. But I hadn't made up my mind until I saw the photo. It was online the next day. Vivian stepping out of her restaurant in sunglasses, head down, paparazzi flashing. My mom was behind her, shielding her with a scarf. My dad in the background, yelling at the reporters. A caption underneath read, Blake family stands united amidst federal probe. United. That's what they called it. Not one of them had ever stood up for me. Not when Vivian erased my work. Not when they laughed at my silence. But now, they were showing up for her. For the empire she built on lies. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. I didn't RSVP. I didn't alert the family. I booked the flight, showed up in a black suit, and took a seat in the back row of the courtroom. No one noticed me, not yet. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back wall, murmuring into recorders. A cameraman from a local station crouched behind a tripod. The front row was reserved for key family and legal representatives. Vivian sat there, centered like she was still the star of her own cooking show. She wore white, not cream, not beige, white. Hair pulled back in a low bun, minimal makeup, that same cool smile she wore on magazine covers. My mother sat beside her, clutching tissues she didn't use. My father sat stone-faced, arms folded like he was daring anyone to question her innocence. They hadn't seen me yet. I'd slipped into the back during the commotion, quiet in a tailored black suit, badge in my inner pocket. No fanfare, no spotlight. That wasn't my job. But today, that was about to change. The hearing began with a long roll call of charges. Supplier misrepresentation, falsified international documentation, unpaid taxes routed through dummy corporations. Each one delivered with the dry tone of bureaucratic rhythm. But the weight in the room was palpable. Vivian smiled through it all. The judge adjusted her glasses. At this time, the court has identified a jurisdictional complication involving cross-border regulatory enforcement. Due to the nature of the sourcing claims, specifically the overseas contracts, a federal advisor will be asked to consult. She turned slightly, eyes scanning the room. Ms. Marina Blake, please approach. Everything stopped. My mother blinked. My father leaned forward, confused. And Vivian turned in her seat, just enough to see me rise. I walked down the aisle, heels echoing softly, past the rows of strangers and flashes of cameras. I didn't rush. I didn't glance at them. I moved like I belonged there, because I did. I reached the bench, opened my folder, and handed over the documentation I'd prepared. My credentials were confirmed. My clearance logged. The judge nodded. Ms. Blake will serve as federal technical advisor for this portion of the hearing. That was it. A single sentence, spoken without fanfare. But behind me, I could feel the tension thicken like cement. I didn't need to turn around to know what I'd see. My mother's mouth slightly open. My father blinking like the courtroom had shifted under his feet. And Vivian, still staring, frozen in her seat, like the camera had caught her between frames. For years they'd spoken about me like I was a footnote, a quiet girl with potential. A bookworm who meant well. They never asked what I did, never wondered where I went, what I built, or why I stayed away. Now they knew. Now the whole room knew. Their disappointment had just become the highest-ranking official in the room. And I didn't flinch. I opened my file, looked directly at the judge, and said, "Ready when you are." Vivian wouldn't look at me after the break. When the court recessed for 10 minutes, she stood stiffly near her attorney, lips pressed into a tight line. My mother whispered frantically in her ear. My father just stared at the floor, unmoving. I stayed by the clerk's desk, reviewing the last set of files, supply contracts from a distribution network in Jakarta that didn't exist, My badge sat on the table beside me, fully visible now. They all knew who I was. Vivian finally approached, heels clicking with controlled rage. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" she hissed under her breath. "To humiliate me, to make it all about you." I didn't answer. "You couldn't stand it," she said, arms crossed. "All these years, watching me succeed while you sat in your dark little corner of obscurity." I turned to face her, calm, steady. "I didn't bring you here, Vivian. Your choices did," she scoffed. "I made one mistake." "No," I said quietly. "You made hundreds, and you made them on paper." Before she could reply, our mother joined us. Her face was flushed, jaw trembling with carefully contained emotion. "Marina," she said, "you've made your point." "This isn't about a point," I replied. "It's about accountability. She's your sister." "And I was your daughter," I said. But that never seemed to matter when she needed a stage. My mother looked like she wanted to argue. But then she saw something in my face, something she hadn't seen before, conviction, distance, and she fell silent. The court was called back to order. The prosecution walked through the final evidence: falsified invoices, altered expense reports, 2 recorded calls between Vivian and her finance lead discussing creative bookkeeping. It was overwhelming, indisputable. Vivian's lawyer didn't even try to rebut the final recordings. He asked for leniency, claimed her empire would collapse, cited the jobs at risk, the charities her brand supported. The judge didn't blink. "Vivian Blake," she said, "this court finds you guilty on 6 counts of supplier fraud, 3 counts of tax evasion, and 1 count of financial misrepresentation in a federal filing. You are hereby sentenced to—" I didn't hear the rest. Not really. My ears filled with the rush of breath I'd been holding for years. Vivian didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, completely still, like the sentence had emptied her out from the inside. I glanced at our parents. My father looked like a man who'd lost a bet he never placed. My mother blinked slowly, her hand frozen mid-reach toward Vivian's shoulder. No one clapped. No one cheered. But inside me, something finally uncurled. Some tight-coiled wire I'd carried since childhood. Not joy, not vengeance, just peace. For the first time, I wasn't trying to be seen. I was standing exactly where I belonged. The morning after the verdict, I sat in my office with the blinds open for the first time in months. Outside, the city was waking up. Sirens in the distance, crosswalks blinking, people spilling out of metro stations in suits and sneakers. I watched it all from behind a mug of coffee I made myself. No schedule, no briefing, just silence. Kira was the first to text. "Kira, you were magnificent. Also, I'm buying you pie. You don't get a choice." Then came an email from Mr. Ashford, my old history teacher. Subject: "Proud doesn't begin to cover it." There were no emojis, no dramatic sign-off. Just one line: "I knew you'd do something that mattered." I stared at it longer than I expected to. My voicemail was full, some from former classmates, a few from people I'd worked with at lower levels of government, even one from a senator's office. People suddenly remembered my name, and then there were the others. "Mom, please call us when you're ready. We didn't know. We just didn't know." "Dad, we're proud of you. I mean that." They both left voicemails too, long rambling messages that swung between apology and nostalgia. Like if they reminded me of old birthday parties or fishing trips, it would erase everything in between. I didn't call back. Vivian hadn't reached out at all. She was under house arrest pending sentencing, her face off every magazine cover she used to dominate. Her restaurants were quietly, temporarily closed. Her team posted a statement about restructuring efforts. But no one was fooled. In the days that followed, the world moved on without her, and I didn't hide anymore. When people asked what I didn't change the subject or shrug. I didn't say, "I work in government," and leave it at that. I told them who I was, what I'd done. I gave a lecture at Georgetown under a pseudonym I'd used for years in published briefs. I had dinner with a foreign attaché who called me the invisible spine of U.S. strategy. I started walking a little taller on the metro. Kira and I met up that weekend. Cheap wine, our usual booth, her boots up on the seat like always. "You did it," she said. "No," I corrected. "I did my part." She raised her glass. "To the quiet ones." I clinked it. "Who are never really that quiet." I still lived in the same apartment. still made the same coffee in the chipped blue mug I'd had since college. But something had shifted. Not in the world, but in me. I didn't need their approval. I never did. I had my own name, my own legacy, and for the first time in my life, I was finally free.